Hello everyone, I'm the Small Time Mini Painter, and today I am painting the Scinari Cathallar from Warhammer's Age of Sigmar. So first things first, I go straight into the basing with a technical from Citadel to help give the base a bit more texture than just the flat black. And as I wait for that to dry, I go straight into the plate that's filled with gold and gems. Since I'm planning on doing a non-metallic metal for this model, I start the gold off with a bit of a light orangey brown, and then as the time comes, I'll be working my way upward to something brighter and brighter. For the gems, they're not really going to be as noticeable, especially with all the smoke effect that goes on over top of them, so there won't be any added effect to the red in the jewels. For the smoke effect, I wasn't entirely sure what I wanted to do with it, so I gave it a black base, put a little bit of really dark red into it, and then did a bit of a dry brush with some very light purple. For the dress, I decided to go for a nice deep blue. For the ceremonial dish, I decided I wanted it to be silver, so I started off with a dark gray. Admittedly, I should have gone for something maybe a bit more darker, but I do think it did come out in the end as how I planned. One of the main things I tend to focus on when I start doing a paint job is getting the base coat down. I don't care so much about detailing at that point. So like for example with the plate, the bottom of it has a bunch of texture on it, which I will eventually paint, but for the time being I want to get that gray down. Once the texture on the base is dry, I give it a nice black over top of it, because that's going to really help bring out the extra colors that I put into it. Sometimes it is incredibly difficult to film while trying to paint detail, mostly because I gotta try and get in as close as possible so I can see what I'm doing, and well, as you can see, my thumb does sometimes get in the way. After not really liking how the smoke looks with the purple highlights, I decided to give it just a little bit of blue ink to help even out the colors. For the rock, I start with a layer of dark gray paint. In fact, it's the same dark gray paint that I gave to the silver plate. To give more depth, I give the black base the same treatment. To help them stand out just a little bit more, I painted the cuffs and the hem of the skirt light purple. Time for another layer on that base. This time I'm using a Willow Bark Express paint to help bring out more of those details. One of of the things I was really looking forward to with this model was painting the gold in both the corset and the headdress. The detailing in the hems would prove to be emotionally taxing. Not because it was particularly difficult, but because I decided at first to go for a light blue to make things a bit more subtle. But as you'll see as it goes on, it was a little too difficult to really see what I was looking at. And if I couldn't really tell what I was looking at in person, there wasn't any way I was going to be able to take pictures of it and have that detail really pop. Now, because I wanted the base to have a bit more of a sandy exterior, I decided to go over the brown with a bit of light yellow. And then, to make even more detail pop on that rock, I gave it a dry brush with some nice light gray. Now at this point I'm a bit tired of working on this base, so I'm just getting it done all at once. I'm giving the base a bit more of a brown so it's not so vibrantly yellow. Painting the grass and the wheat, giving those a little bit of highlight as well as putting some moss on the rock with a couple bits of green and a couple spackles of yellow. And by the time it's all done, I think it looks like a pretty damn good base. And now I move on to the piece that I've been the most looking forward to when starting this mini, the veil. One of the things that most excited me about this bit was not the fact that it was a veil just in general, but the fact that it was a sheer cloth, which means that I have to be able to see the face from beneath the cloth while still giving it the effect of there being a cloth over top of the face. This was a challenge that I had never done before and was equal parts nervous and excited. Essentially, how I ended up managing to make it happen was with incredibly watered down flesh tone paint. Once the face was done, I moved on to the headdress, which was a lot of fun to paint. Between the gold and the blue, it really popped and came out so nice. I can't express just how giddy I am with how well that turned out and how minimal effort I actually managed to have to maintain with it, despite a lot of detail being present, especially with the gold bits. Eventually I decided to change the trim on the hem and the cuffs. And while it's still technically a light blue, it's a lot more vibrant and really helps make the purple, the blue, and the blue of the trim really stand out from one another. Normally for flesh, I do 3 specific layers. A basic flesh tone to help lay down the base, a pale flesh tone to help bring out the highlights, and then a flesh wash to help bring out more of the details. Now, they like to say that the devil is in the details, and that could not be any more true, especially with miniature painting. And before I could even think of sticking it to the base, I had to get the last bit of the details finished, including the little pom-poms on the gold trim, and all the other little bits that are strewn about with the main torso of the model. One thing I consistently ended up forgetting about throughout the entire process of the model is her hair. I don't know why that's the one thing that just constantly slipped through the cracks, but it just kind of was. It's not really a big deal because it did eventually get done, but it was just one of those things that I just kept forgetting about all the way through. I started the hair off with a deep orange brown, and through a series of progressively lighter shades, she would eventually become a redhead. And finally, after countless, and I do mean countless touch-ups, it was finally time to put the entire mini together so I can finally get on to the non-metallic metal shading. The concept of non-metallic metal is a really difficult procedure, while also being kind of simple at the same time, because non-metallic metal tends to work in a way where it's progressively lighter shades as it moves up. That said, that's the easy thing to understand. The hard thing to understand is how light and metal work together, and that takes experience and paying attention to how light meets metal. And that's not really something that you can just learn overnight. You gotta look at a bunch of reference photos and see what you can figure out and see what you can notice in your own real life. And then, once you've got that understanding, then you have to decide how the light is going to hit your model so you know what's going to shine and what's not. Non-metallic metal is one of those things that is easily difficult and difficultly easy. And I am describing that so poorly, but I honestly have no idea how to describe it in a way that actually makes sense. And granted, some of that is absolutely because I am a total noob when it comes to non-metallic metal, and while I do feel like this model in particular did really shine and really show that I do have at least some understanding as to how metal works and how light shines off of it, I am not saying that I am by any means an expert. I am still very much learning. Since I was doing non-metallic metal and trying to bring out as much detail as absolutely possible throughout the entire model, something I didn't want to do is just leave the dress as one solid color. So, basing off of where the light was hitting, I also brought out a lot of the color from the ripples as well. This of course starts by using progressively lighter blues to try and bring out more of the detail, until I get to the point where I'm using a very light blue. Now, I kinda did a little bit of a mess up, and my dry brushing was a little not on point with this one. However, I do feel it really actually helped bring out more detail in the dress, and kind of gave it a bit more of a galaxy appeal as well, which honestly I really loved. And finally, after so many hours of shading and touch-ups and cleanups and more shading and more cleanups and more shading and more cleanups, seriously, it was a lot. The model was finally completed. Thank you all for accompanying me on this paint journey with me. I'm still very much new to the hobby, so I'm still learning a lot. And not just in painting, but also in terms of video editing. I'm doing this mostly just so I have a record of, my own progress, as I try and work my way to get good enough that I feel like I can actually compete in Gold and Dean. That said, if anybody would like me to do more in terms of slowing things down a little bit, doing actual step-by-step, and including exact paints that I'm using at any given point, I would like any advice that anybody can give on how to make my content even better than what it is. I mean, granted, I've only got 2 videos right now, but at the same time, I'll take whatever advice I can get. But with that said, thank you all for being here. Make sure to like, share, comment, subscribe.